Ari Tulla, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Elliot. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have you here and looking forward to the topics that we're going to dive into today. But for those who may have not come across the work that you do or yourself before, can you give us a bit of context about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so happy to dive in a little bit on my background and what I've been doing in the past. But I'm an entrepreneur. Spent the last decade and a bit more in healthcare, building three different companies. And before that, I was a technologist. I spent about another decade in the world of video games mainly. So I think I come for the area of nutrition and health and wellness from the perspective of tech mainly, and I've been an athlete also all my life. So I'm from Finland, and as many Finnish boys, I played hockey for my youth and never became NHL star as I was hoping to, but not everybody can get all the way. Uh, and but I got a lifelong passion on activities and sports and so forth. And last 25 years I've been pretty actively doing rock climbing and also do a lot of board sports from surfing to snowboarding to other things. And lately I've been also doing a lot of cycling and mountain biking, which is I think a great sport for older older men like myself. But yeah, my goal really is to build healthcare companies that are making people's lives better. And I've been dabbling in building a company in helping people find a doctor. That became a pretty good and a big play. Then I was helping big enterprise companies in the US to create better doctor networks to help people access healthcare better. And for the last years, I've been working now in nutrition and trying to build this new idea of smart nutrition. So think about making your supplementation, your protein powder, and even your meals smarter and more tailored for you. And the underlying kind of fact there is that we're trying to focus on this concept that is very old. Food is medicine, and today, of course, as we all know, food is kind of considered to be almost poison. But food can also heal you if you do it right.
Yeah, this is a fascinating concept. Some things that we're going to jump into a little bit more in just a moment. But I want to take a little bit of a step back. And you mentioned that in the early days of your career, you prioritized being more in the technological aspect. You also mentioned in another podcast I heard you speak on that you also worked for Nokia as well. When did you make that decision from saying, well, I'm going to focus primarily on technology to focusing more on healthcare and providing that for people?
Yeah, I'm a very typical person in the sense who became a health entrepreneur. Most people like myself, we had a personal story, a personal reason to do that, and because healthcare, there's nothing fun about it. It's very complicated. It's messy. It's hard. Uh, it's just a very complex field in general. But at the same time, there's a massive reward if you can build things that people can get benefit. Because as we all know, when you get sick, you are at your weakest and you really need help. And if you think about your life, when everything goes well, you worry about mundane. But when you get sick, then that becomes the only thing that matters. Think
Absolutely.
about complicated illness like even like obesity for many people, but cancer and other heart diseases are when it's about life and death, that's the only thing that matters. And for myself, I think um, I got a wake up call very early in my life in a way that my wife had a thyroid tumor about 22 years ago. She was a young, very healthy 20-year-old, and suddenly you kind of wake up and you realize that you have something wrong in you, and the other thyroid had to be removed. There's a pretty big tumor taken away at the same time. Luckily, there was no life-threatening impact. But what happened is that she was basically, because of the thyroid removal, she got into autoimmune diseases, hormonal imbalances, many of these unknown unknowns we don't really know about. And when you are 20 or 25, whatever, and you realize that, somebody that you love, is facing kind of the mortality, you also start to think about world differently. And we basically got the verdict after this operation that we can never get pregnant, we can never have family, and that was a tough thing when you find your spouse in a way, and you find the person you want to spend your time with. And we spent about 10 years to try to overcome that by different things. We work with Western and Eastern medicine, and in the end we found that food actually was able to help her lower inflammation, get rid of the autoimmune conditions, and actually the body was able to heal itself. And today we have two healthy kids roaming around here in in the pool right now, and it's pretty cool when you learn yourself that food can be this healing function. So that made me a believer. And when we had a completely unrelated incident that happened with our first son who passed away 10 years ago, and that was the time when I decided to spend my time in healthcare. And I was working on mobile games and stuff that was growing rapidly, and very cool space at the time. And but I decided that I want to be doing something that is more valuable for me as a person. And it's been one of the best decisions in my life that I made a change, because I've been able to build things that actually have helped people, and I've been able to connect with this sort of new group of people who are doctors and healthcare workers and people in wellness and nutrition. And I learned completely new trait, and it's been super rewarding. So I speak a lot publicly about the fact that if you are 20 something and you want to make your mark in life and world, do you really want to go and try to build another photo sharing or social networking app or another game? I think you can also look around and do something in healthcare, for example, that could be more meaningful. And usually the people who are working in healthcare are more like looking like me, who are in their 40s or 50s, and who already had that moment that they decided to change the trajectory. But you don't need to be that old. You can do it as a younger age as well.
What an incredible story. And like you said, you had that moment of realization that you could do something that has a little bit more meaning, and you've really followed that passion, and you had a heavy, heavy reason why to do it as well, which is amazing. I think that we get many calls in life, and I think that when we listen to them and we kind of head straight down that route, they usually bring beautiful things. And it sounds like it's done exactly that for you as well. And obviously, you touched on the fact that food can indeed be medicine. So, how do we transform food from being the leading cause of disease, as you put it, to medicine?
Yeah, it's a $100 billion question, or maybe a $1 trillion question. I mean, it's one of the biggest things, I think. Of course, when we think about the things we worry about. I mean, last few years, many of us have been worrying more about health and our loved ones' health than ever before in our life. Many more people had that realization that we are mortal, life is finite because of COVID. I mean, we all know somebody who died or passed away too early, and that's of course sad. But also it was a wake-up call for many people to look in a mirror and say, what can I do about it? Like, can I take control of that? I mean, if I have underlying conditions, let's say I'm obese, I have diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I have all these different things in my body that are making me vulnerable for the COVID. And many people thought about, like, what could I do? Could I change something? And I think there are huge motivation now around the world for people to take the control of their life. And I think we almost all of us know, I think, what to do, how to. We don't want to eat too much sugar. We don't want to eat too much. We need to move a bit more. We need to sleep better. We need to stress less. I mean, very easy to say, but very difficult to implement in your life, because you then open your telly, or you look at the billboard, or you walk in a grocery store, and everything that's advertised to you is something that you should never probably eat. There's never there's no ad group for kale and veggies and the good stuff. I mean, the water doesn't have an ad council in a way. So it's just silly in a way that we everything we are bombarded with today is something that is unhealthy. So how can you make a decision to live healthily if everything that is around you is talking opposite? And how can you even believe in your mind that that this stuff that I'm maybe eating is poisonous in the long term, but you don't see the impact immediately. It happens over time in the 10 or 15 years. And at the same time, you basically are then seeing all this advertising and all the lore around you, people doing this. So you can't really believe it can be that bad. Many people tell me that if it would be that bad, wouldn't be banned. And then I always respond that, I mean, think about in the 70s, even early 80s in some place in the world, there were doctors who were advertising cigarettes. I mean, if you go back in the US in the 50s and 30s, most of the cigarette brands had a doctor endorsing it. As a, like, it lowers your stress level and whatnot. So, I mean, that was the world less than
It
100
wasn't that
years
long
ago
ago.
around the world, and even like 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, I mean that was silly. And now we think about smokers like you are killing yourself. We all know that. And if you look at the younger generations, they don't even smoke. I mean nobody's smoking anymore. It's done. So I think the same will happen now with the processed food that is not really real food at all. It's a cocktail of salt and sugar and fat built into this sort of a addictive mass that is just really not good for you, and it's really not good for your brain because it is really addictive. I mean, sugar is almost as addictive as heroin for a lot of people. So that's just a kind of bit of an overlay where we are and what to do about it. I think we have to probably regulate by government. We have to vote with our you know elections. We have to vote with our wallet as people, but it will likely be like tobacco, that there has to be a new generation of people coming in who will then change the course. Many people likely can't make the change themselves. There has to be systems built around it, but governments have little appetite in, at least in the US, maybe a bit more in Europe. I mean, you are now in Mexico, and I think you likely have seen that
Yes.
there's the labeling today in Mexico, and that's really powerful. Like if you go and look like a candy aisle or you go to the cookies aisle, most of the product have labeling telling that this product has a lot of saturated fat. It's processed heavily.
Excess sugars, yeah,
Exactly.
excess fats, exactly.
So the two countries, Mexico and then Chile, who were the first ones to implement this, and there has been a big impact on people's health. And I believe that every country in Europe, for example, are going to have this in the next, 5 to 10 years. US, I don't know if we can ever do that. People are gonna be against it because it's against the free will of people. Of course, we can't tell them that you're killing yourself. That's not cool.
I see the utility of this situation and the direction that it's heading in, but I struggle to feel that we're close. I don't know about you. Obviously, I didn't live through the 70s and the 80s to understand the big fad of smoking and how its impact was on every single person on a day-to-day basis. But when I see food today, like you see industries of restaurants and fast food places and people's social lives being built around drinking and eating. And I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I don't feel like cigarettes had as much of a pull as the industry of restaurants and fast food does right now, and the industry of like marketing when it comes to the amount of fast food options and candy bars and everything like that that's advertised to us on a day-to-day basis. So how far do you feel that we're away from this? Because if I'm in Mexico and I see the sign saying excess fat and excess sugar, but I also go outside and I see, a big billboard for KFC. So it feels a little far away from me. So how close do you see it being?
I mean, we are in the very beginning. It's kind of like the same as global warming that or climate change that it's a very difficult thing to solve. And I mean, you're right. Tobacco is. I mean, you don't need to smoke. Yes, I mean, smoking is addictive. Smoking was made very cool at some point, not like today when it's uncool. Uh, but people smoke because it was kind of like a more like a James Dean did it. I do it. It's like I'm a rebel in a way. I do it because it's something that I can do for myself. Moment with me, and all this stuff. But food, of course, as you said, we eat every day, 1 to 5 times or even more. you can't, if you don't eat for 2 weeks, you're gonna be, not good. So you have to eat, and we are. I mean, this whole notion. I think that I'm in French Polynesian right now, and French, of course, they talk about this a lot, and they love food, like Italians. There's a different culture in food, healthier, I think, than in the U.S. or even in UK. But they often think about this, like, am I here to eat? Like, is eating really the purpose of being, or am I eating to feed and fuel myself? And many people, eating is one of the key pieces of their life. And we have had, culture of breaking bread and feeding people together, having a meal together for thousands of years. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
one
very
of the reasons why
symbolic,
we
right?
became what we are. Like, humans are basically here partially because we invented, fire, and we were able to cook together and eat in a groups of people. Our brain grew because we were able to eat more nutritious food after cooking and all this stuff. So there's a lot of impact. This is a fundamental thing, makes us who we are as humans, and also culture. Like, what is you if I'm a Finn? You're Brit, right? So what makes us who we are? I mean, food is a big part of the lore. We already lost, most of us lost our money already. We have euro or whatever we have. You guys are still having pound. But the point is that you have this sort of dilemma that who am I? What is it to be a Finn or be an American or so forth? And food, of course, is a big piece of it. So, I mean, it is a very difficult thing. Like, how do we are not only changing the way we eat, but we're going to change culture. But the good thing is that you can make any food, you can make it to be poisonous, or you can make it to be pretty healthy, and it will taste about the same. And it's just the way how you make it. Of course, making the healthier may be a bit more expensive. So, like I said already, you have to think about this in a way. There has to be a government intervention. There has to be more education. There has to be taxation, making the stuff that is expensive, the bad stuff more expensive, like sugar and so forth. But those are things that are very difficult to get done. And then I think, only thing I see working today is the grassroots level, where there are people who are preaching about this. I'm a tiny voice in this group, and I think companies like what I'm trying to build, that are making it easier for people to do the right thing. And I think I'm a technologist, so if I look at it from that perspective, the number one thing that I believe in myself is that if we are able to build better measurements on food and nutrition in real time basis, then we can actually change people behavior. Because if you can measure something, you can improve it. And that's why, like, glucose monitoring, even like keto monitoring, those are things that you can do in real time basis, and it will give you feedback loop about what are you doing that is good or bad for you. And if you can do something good and you can see the outcomes after it, then you're going to build a feedback loop that will be positive. And if you see a negative feedback loop, then you likely will stop doing something. So that is, in my opinion, the key thing that I'm trying to work on. Like, can we build feedback loops on nutrition that are helping people to measure and quantify the impact on their bodies?
Yeah, I think education is a big part of the puzzle here, and those like yourself who are kind of battling the pharmaceutical industry and everything along those lines. But there's more and more voices and more people doing this at this moment, and I think it's the wisest way to do it, because if we're looking at a government intervention, we're not going to get into politics here, but there's a lot of people who are taking advantage, mainly in the pharmaceutical industry, of people's poor decisions with their nutrition and with their health. And, then all of a sudden they can charge for diabetes medication or anything like that. And we saw that in COVID as well, the ridiculous prices of PCR tests and all these other things, when realistically, and the vaccines as well, of course, whereas realistically, like, if the objective was just to have people healthy, it wouldn't be an issue to have to, not have enough to send around the world, or to have to pay ridiculous amounts for these certain tests and everything along those lines. And a certain percentage of fees, absolutely, but a ridiculous profit made from pharmaceutical companies and others is, it shows the real incentive and priorities behind these companies, and then obviously the connection that has with the government and all the things that have been done to get that into the country as well. So I think education, and like you said, making people aware of what they can feel like, the real data, and how the impact of food can really feel. Because that's the biggest thing in my work as well. It's like, when people get to a stage where they do want to transform their health, and I am allowed to show them and give them some ideas of how to improve their nutrition, and they start to feel it, then they truly believe it. So I think that going down that route is enormous.
Yeah, I think the feeling thing is an interesting one, and you know that probably better than most. I mean, I think people will feel the difference fairly quickly, but then feeling is a very kind of soft and touchy thing, and people are very different, and you like to know this, but just for the sake of maybe people haven't heard about it, but if you think about men and women, men tend to be much worse at actually being able to feel the impact of anything or feel how their body feels. So most men today, they don't know if they are thirsty or hungry. Most people end up eating when they would need to drink water. And that is one reason why we eat too often and too much. And it's interesting when you have, like my wife who has went through a few pregnancies, she has this sort of a superpower, and having illness for a long time, I mean, she has superpower of feeling her body in a way that I have no ability. Like, she can, when she's getting sick, she can kind of feel that, I'm actually getting sick, like, and knows how. I can't fathom how she's doing that. And I've been doing a lot of things like I wore a glucose monitor, for example, for a couple of years myself, and I still use it quite often. And in that case, I learned because I can't do rice, I can't do corn, I can't do those things that my ancestors never had. My glucose will spike quickly and then drop off under 70, and whatever the measurement is in different countries, they're different in some places. But anyway, the point is that I do that, and over the year or two, I learned to feel the glucose going up. So I have this feeling in my, or maybe like a sound in my inner ear that I can actually feel it. And that is a new skill I created for myself after having the technology help me kind of guiding my feelings. So I have a hope that in the coming years we are able to build systems that are able to build us these senses. And then we don't need to use the tech, we can just feel it in our body. But we have to first teach our body to understand those senses.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good example of this is HRV testing, right? We can see after a few bad scores on the HRV reading that there's probably a sign that we're going to start to feel unwell in some days if, yeah, the scores start to change in a way and we're not really sure why. We're still training, eating, and sleeping the same way that we would usually do, yet the return on the screen, whether it's through an Oura ring or a different app, it tends to be, heading in one certain direction. And then obviously that can teach you, okay, when I'm starting to feel a little bit run down, and give you a prediction of that as well. And obviously you invested in Aura as well. I heard you mention on another podcast that you are an investor in 50 companies. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, so when we had the um, drama in our family, I mean, we decided to also pull up some of our capital and then build this small family office called Do Good Ventures, and we invest in kind of companies focused on human health, human performance, and helping people to live with better nutrition. And I think Aura was one of the first companies we invested a bit of money in the very beginning of the company, and it's been really fun to. I mean, why we do that? We are not like, we don't have millions and millions of dollars to invest, but we want to join companies early, and if we can, we try to help them a little bit, and at minimum we are loyal, passionate super users, and with Aura, I think it has been really fun to follow. I mean, I knew the founders already. They are from my hometown in Oulu in Finland, so I knew some of them very early, and it's been interesting to see a company that kind of invented this idea of a ring that you can measure your sleep and now activity as well, and see how they built the product over time. It was very clunky and a big thing in the beginning, and then over the years it became smaller and more beautiful, and now I think it looks nice. It's like titanium, and it's like just a really cool looking piece of tech, and now millions of people are wearing one. So I learned a lot by following them closely, and saw some of the key decisions that they made. Like they decided to go to sleep, not really the activity, and that was the right call for them. And now I think they are winning this new market on who dominates the hand, the ring. And many, if you look at celebrities, you can go from LeBron to many newscasters. They have an Oura ring today, and I think if you go to Silicon Valley, like you walk in San Francisco, half the people have one. So it becomes completely dominant, and I think they're gonna sell many millions or more rings because it actually is a good thing, And your point about HRV is super interesting. So I'm from a small town in Finland, in the same town that they invented this small company called Polar Electro. And Polar, of course, is the company making watches, more for like triathletes and stuff like that. And they, I think, were part of inventing the whole HRV idea, and they invented the heart rate strap that you put in your chest. And but I've been measuring HRV for myself. I mean, for more than 20 years as an athlete, and I never train if my HRV is too low. And I was just like checking out when we were speaking here, like my my sleep from last night. Uh, I mean, yeah, it's like I had a maximum 240 HRV last night. So I mean, I'm a kind of vacationing process. So I'm sleeping really well, but it's looks like my Whoop score is 99 today for recovery. So happily gonna go do stuff today.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, right? You can probably feel it within yourself. You probably get reinforcement by the data. But at this stage, like you said, you had that little bit of technological help, but actually you probably already knew that you felt ready and good to train today, right?
Yeah, but I think there's the funny thing. I've been talking to a lot of and we are involved in like many type of companies to invest in monitoring space, like not only sleep or activity, but also glucose and sweat and urine and DNA and microbiomes, a lot of different places that we can collect data. But HRV is simple. But think about this. I think it's fun idea for people to think like how many gold medals, how many championships have been lost by people waking up at the wrong time in the morning when they were deep in the REM sleep, and you are crocky when you can sleep really well, but if you wake up middle of a REM sleep, you're gonna feel like something is off. So how many people went to the Olympics and they woke up just in the wrong time in the morning, and then they never won the medal that they were training for all their life? How many normal people like us, are gonna go into the meeting or to the job interview or the date that we felt groggy because we woke up in the wrong time? So I think it's a nice thing to know that at least the data is telling you that you should be okay performing. And sometimes the data tells you that you are not okay, and then you maybe know a bit earlier that you might be getting sick, you might have a flu, or you might have COVID or whatnot. So I think it's pretty cool to have that data, and that's really, I think, the first incarnation of this idea of a feedback loop I talked about. And I mean, I can attest that I see a lot of these new ideas and the new science happening right now. And I can tell everybody that it's going to be a very cool world in a decade from now. There's so much new stuff coming up, and there will be many companies that are building like you don't need to have a ring, you don't need to have a watch. You can have a small patch on your back that will measure almost all the functions in your body, and that will talk directly to your phone and or cloud, and basically give you guidance and even like guide your doctor and even diagnose like serious illnesses. So that's happening soon, and then of course later you're gonna have an implantable thing in your bloodstream that can measure you in more even in detail and can maybe last like a year, the battery, so you don't need to switch it all the time. So there's so much cool stuff happening right now, and I can't wait to see these things in the market.
Yeah, and with all the things coming along and all the advancements in the technology that you see, how do you know whether it's the right decision to make an investment in a certain company? Because there's a lot of phases, there's a lot of fads, there are a lot of things that seem like they have an enormous amount of potential, but then they don't tend to follow through. So what's your decision-making process when it comes to some of the companies that you come across, some of the people and the innovators with these ideas? How do you know that this one is going to be the one?
Well, I try to be involved myself in a way that I want to try out the early prototypes, and I have tested many hundreds of things early. Many of them have died, never saw the light of day. And I think in the end, when you are building a company or you're building anything, not doesn't need to be a company, but it's about the people. Do the people have the motivation? Do the people have the tenacity to spend a decade on doing something? And that's more important than anything. So I tend to invest in people that I already know, and then to work with people who maybe have built one or two companies already. Usually the first one you fail, maybe the second one you. So there's a book, if anyone is interested about founding companies and whatnot. There's a book called Super Founders. So Super Founders is a look on data on like 2,000 startups that became unicorns, or billion-dollar valuation or more. And then they looked at companies that didn't, and they were looking at what is the difference between the founder team or the founders or the ideas, and they found out that there was not really many things that correlated. But the one thing that correlated the most is that when people had already founded one company, even if it failed, the second one was more likely to be a success. So that's, I think, the funny thing in life, that sometimes you want to try again, and you want to get back on track, and just do it again.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to think about when you're looking into the investments as well. And you've co-founded a company called Elo, and you spoke to us earlier a little bit about smart nutrition. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I would love to. So at Elo, we are trying to build this idea that we call smart nutrition. So what is smart? Like you said, back in the days, I worked at Nokia, the small Finnish cell phone company that basically invented the cell phone and the smartphone. And then Apple and Google, Android, they ate the lunch, and Nokia sold the phone division back in the days to Microsoft. But what Nokia did, Nokia built the first phones that were doing video, had a web browser, had email, all these things that we think now are the core building blocks of a smartphone. And Nokia didn't name those devices smartphones. And I was there in a room when people were thinking about what to name these things, and we called them mobile computers. But I think there was a smartphone name on the wall somewhere that we did not pick, and that was a mistake, because smartphone was the word that really kind of is telling you what the device are. And just to kind of put it into context, like, what is a smart device? It can be your car, your Tesla. It can be your home now, home monitoring, whatever you have. It can be the watch. What makes these things smart is the fact that they are personal to you. So think about your phone. It's the most personal device you have. It's like it has your apps, it has your contact, your loved ones, whatever, your photos and videos. It's also precise. It's very technically, sophisticated. There's a lot of new chips and tech and radios and so forth. And it's also becoming now proactive. Think about like what people love about Tesla the most, almost, is the fact that when you buy a new Tesla and you have your phone with you, and the phone is the key. You walk into the car, and automatically when you open the door, the mirrors are gonna move, the seat is gonna move the right position, and you get the right playlist playing there. And your spouse or your friend would go the same car, it would be a different experience. So that is about the proactiveness. So we've been trying to think at Elo whether we could do the same thing for nutrition. Could we make, let's say, supplements and the powders and proteins and whatnot, could we make meals, food delivery, to be similar, to be personal to you, to be precise, grounded in real science, real evidence, and then finally be proactive, getting better over time. So that's what we've been working now for a few years, and we have two products out in the market. The first one we got out 2 years ago is basically blood test, blood biomarker-based supplementation. So we do at-home blood work collected with the finger prick. We test the blood, and then we give you supplements based on the blood data, your health questionnaire, and we even pair you with the dietitian. So you work one-on-one with the real person who is a nutrition expert. And the new product we got out a moment ago is Smart Protein. So in that case, you can do blood testing, you don't have to, but you can basically connect your health and fitness devices and wearables and apps into Elo via Apple Health. And then we give you a protein powder that can also contain boosts that are basically supplements in the powder, but we design it based on your workout history. And of course, we can make it whey, we can make it vegan, pea, we can have carbs, or we don't have carbs, depending what you want. But base idea is that the whole blend is every month tailored to you based on your workout profile. And then the cool thing we implemented early on already is that when you do a workout, think about, you go for a run, you are tracking that on your Apple Watch, or you go for a bike ride, you use Strava, or you go and use a Peloton, or you use a home fitness device. All that data can flow into Elo if you so want. And if you do that, then you get the real-time notification after your ride or run or training, how much protein you need. And that's been a game changing for some people, because people don't really know when to take protein, what is the ideal timing, what is the ideal dosing? And we created that, and the feedback has been immensely good over the last few months.
Yeah, it's incredible. I've never heard anything quite like it. Can you give us an example of how the recommendation might change based on us just going for a gentle 5K versus us doing something closer to a half marathon distance in running, for example?
Absolutely. So in my case, I do a lot of cycling. So I do like two things mainly. I do cycling 3 4 times a week, and then I rock climb about 3 or 4 times a week. And rock climbing is something I still try to compete a bit, but they're very different because cycling is like long distance endurance. Climbing is more like this sort of explosive, full power type of thing in bouldering. So they are very different. And if I would do 1 week or 1 month when I only do rock climbing, I would basically have a very different type of protein blend. I wouldn't need to have carbs that are helping my recovery and replenish my body. I wouldn't need to have electrolytes at all because I don't really sweat that much when I do like an hour at the gym. When I do 5 hour rides on the wild, it's very different. So basically, the blend is being calculated based on what I did the previous month. And then if I do, let's say, a 5 hour bike ride, it's all about, if you think about what's important in the amino acids in protein, one of the key pieces that is helping the muscle synthesis is leucine. So leucine is the amino acid that is the most important one in many ways. And of course, there are other ones as well. We want to do full branched, amino acid blend for you. But the leucine amount is one of the key pieces. And then there's a lot of debate in the industry that, how much leucine you need after exercise per kilogram. And I think there's a gap. You can't absorb more than a certain amount. But there's a lot of dialogue today that some of the recommendations that we had in the past are quite wrong. Pea, for example, pea protein is likely not as soluble or bioavailable for you as the whey protein. And there are new protein blends coming out in the market today that might be even more available for your body. Because if we think about there's amount of leucine in all of these, but is it as bioavailable? So we are looking like very detailed, like what type of protein you have, pea or whey, and then trying to give you the right amount of leucine. So for example, if I do an hour at the gym, I'm going to have 1 scoop recommendation. If I do 2.5 hour bike ride, I'm going to have a 2.5 scoop likely recommendation. So it's a very different amount of protein. And what we are now doing is pretty cool. It's not out yet, but we are testing it now, which is basically giving people a recipe for if you want to do a smoothie, for example. Some people do it just with water. Many people do that's fine. It tastes good. But if you do it with a smoothie, we're going to have soon recipes on the app that are designed based on your goals and your activity and so forth. So we're going to double help you to get the right stuff. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's super powerful stuff. And I can see the interest from an athletic perspective. But the big problem I find with everyday people is that they don't necessarily know whether they're thriving, but kind of as you alluded to earlier, men aren't always super aware of how they're feeling. And a lot of people, as long as they can show up to their meetings, as long as they can arrive to work on time, as long as they can, go to the social that they want to on a Thursday or Friday night, they're pretty okay with, how they're performing in life. How much application does this have to the everyday person versus an athlete?
Well, I think we built this product for athlete and you I think you alluded already in a way that this product can be used in many different ways. And today, yes, we built a specific application now for more people who want to recover. It's a recovery type of product, but the same thing could and will likely be used fairly soon as a meal replacement as well. So there's a big dilemma I think today in nutrition that many of us we get too many calories. But if you look at people who are 40 or older, especially women, they don't get enough protein. And you know this super well because you work in the field that if you are 45 and you are looking at I want to lose weight, for example, it's super important to also consider the fact that you don't want to lose muscle because you can only gain muscle until you're like 55. If you're 60, it's going to be very difficult to gain muscle anymore. So it's almost like you want to have a certain amount of muscle in your body at the age of 55. Otherwise, you're going to be frail when you are 70. You can live up to 90, but then the last 10 years you're going to have you can't get up from bed or from the chair easily because you don't have the muscle. I mean, that's something that most people don't think about. If you think about the health span and the lifespan, health span means that you can live good life yourself independently, and lifespan of course means like how long you're going to be here before you're going to be dead. And many people think that those are the same thing, but they are not. There's often a gap of even 10 years gap between the health span and the lifespan, and the last 10 years are going to be miserable. None of us want to live in a way that we are in tubes in a bed for last 2 to 3 years. We want to be active and rather go with the bang than go with the slow decay. So that's something that I think is really important for people when you think about protein. And I think there's a big application for the women, for example, who are 45 plus, to get a really good protein product that they can actually know how to do it. And of course, like protein, you can always take too much. And there are a lot of gym rats out there who have been eating protein like way too much. And like I said, there's an upper limit. And just keep in mind that a protein basically in your body, it works to build muscle. It's fuel for your body. It's very powerful. But it's also, if you take protein too frequently, all the time throughout the day, think about it, you eat like a protein bar every 2 hours. That's the worst thing you can do to your body, because then you are initiating the growth hormones, your growth factor in your body, and you can also grow cancer and tumors and stuff like that. So you need to be sophisticated thinking a bit about like when do you do protein, at what time I'm going to replenish my body to help my muscles heal and grow, and then when do I want to do something else. So many people do protein totally wrong, and I would caution people of doing like protein all the time throughout the day. Not a good idea.
What's your general recommendation on protein for, let's say, females over the age of 40, 45?
It depends a bit on your activity level and your size, but I don't want to say like a gram amount. I think you can go to elo.health website. We have a lot of blog posts about it today. You can read about there. But I can't give you like a one amount of grams because it depends by people.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's say a typical woman who's maybe just started a little bit of resistance training. She's not super active. She's fairly sedentary in her work, and she wants to drop a little bit of body fat. Of course, you're going to need the measurements and everything along those lines. But if you're able to give someone a rough guide, because I'm sure there's many women listening with their ears open now, like, okay, but where do I go with this?
I would rather not give because again, like I said, we try to be specific on this, and there's a aspect. I mean, something is like like how much dosing. Like people ask me all the time, like vitamin D. I talk about that quite a bit, and I just don't want to give a dosing because I mean, for me, it was 10,000 IU of vitamin D I need, and it will be a bit dependent on who you are. And I want to avoid this idea that I can give a blanket statement something on any dosing because it's not going to be easy. And I try to build everything we do at Elo. I try to make it very precise and scientific. And there's so many people saying that here's a one rule of thumb, use it. I don't disagree with that idea, but I don't want to be one of those people who are giving rules of thumbs.
Yep, that's completely fair. And I think that the main thing that we can look at is the individual themselves, and obviously look at their needs and then tweak things here and there to essentially find what's right for them. The challenge that I have is obviously there's not really much of a middle ground. There's like kind of these government recommendations where if you look at the vitamin D, it's like barely 1,000 IU a day. And then there's someone like yourself saying you're taking 10,000. So I think what needs to be done is potentially finding a middle ground, understanding that everyone's specific, but I think that there's almost too much of the extreme ends of the spectrum, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think, and the vitamin D, by the way, like why is it 10,000 is that my team, so I'm from northern Finland, my ancestry is certain type, and we realized that I have 2 mutations in my DNA that I don't metabolize vitamin D well. DNA told me that I'm likely having those mutations, and by testing my blood, my team validated I actually do have both of them active. They are on my epigenetics. So I got 3,000 IU vitamin D. It didn't go up at all. I was at the teens, like way below the ideal level. It took me a year and a half to get back on track. I had sequenced my extended family in Finland. They all had the same mutation. They all had the same problem before COVID, and we were able to help them to get the vitamin D up, and none of them died of COVID. So that was a kind of good example. But again, it was very precisely about my mutation that's fairly rare. Very few people in the US have this mutation, for example. And for the protein, I think it's even more important to point out that what type of protein are you having? Are you, having a protein from the eggs, or are you having it from the chicken breast, or are you having from protein powder or the vegan powder? It really depends a lot what type of application you are getting the protein from, and that was not as easy as maybe having a gram amount like you normally see. And there's a really, really good podcast. I think Peter Attia, he interviewed a person who is actually the person who helped to define the guidance. And I think, if I remember correctly, the guidance is coming from a study that was done in sub-Saharan Africa for boys who were 15 or so years old. And they were looking at like malnourishment, how much protein is needed to not be malnourished. So that study is kind of the baseline study for the current protein recommendations we have in our society in the textbooks. So I mean, is the 45-year-old woman in somewhere in England or in the US the same as the 15-year-old boy in the sub-Saharan Africa? Likely not. So it's always interesting when you have some of these kind of rules of thumb in nutrition, and I want to always go like, what is the source of truth? What is the ground truth behind this number? And when you go all the way there, you sometimes surprise yourself that, wow, it's pretty not sophisticated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are many different reference points, and I think, like you said, it's just about finding the best option for you. And if you go based on a recommendation and that's where you get started, yet you don't feel potentially the effects of that, that's probably when you did a little bit deeper. And you mentioned that you did blood work and obviously had supplementation based on that as well. What were some of the key biomarkers that you were looking at when it comes to optimizing someone's performance or optimizing someone's health?
Yeah, there are a lot of things you could look, and today the good thing is that with COVID, the at-home collection and testing became more common. So it lowering the barrier and lowering the price for doing blood work. Because if you normally go to your doctor, what they're going to test is going to be cholesterol, your LDL, triglycerides, HDL. They're going to look at your A1C for your diabetes marker. They maybe look at your complete blood panel with the white blood cells and inflammation and stuff like that. But it's a pretty standard thing we have done for a long time. And even that is usually not done every year. It's done sporadically. And there's this element that is kind of interesting for, I think, people to know. A lot of the data and the testing that we have today in healthcare is done when people are sick. Think about yourself, like, when do you get tested? You get tested when you go to a doctor office and you are complaining about something. So we are trying to detect. So we don't really have that many people tested who are healthy when they are healthy. So a lot of the data we have today is skewed because of the fact we are testing people when they are sick. And if you ever been in a hospital, you get tested every day. So we are doing billions of tests today every year, but not many of them are done to people who are healthy. So I think it's really good that we are now testing more healthy people. And what we decided to do at Elo, we wanted to do like that sort of a complete view of your health, and then add a little bit of vitamins and minerals. So we today are doing the lipid panel, the HDL, LDL, triglycerides, total cholesterol. We look at the A1C for your diabetes. We look at inflammation, homocysteine. We look at iron, ferritin for your iron levels, which is kind of important for women especially. And then we're looking vitamin D and vitamin B12. And now we are looking to add a few more. We want to add hormones like testosterone, THS for women. We want to add, maybe omega-3 panel. It's interesting because many people have omega-3, omega-6 is upside down. So that will be kind of the panel that is a good baseline to understand. And very few people have ever done that whole panel. And when you do that, by the way, and we have done thousands of these, so we have the data, but 90% of people who are quite healthy, they do have something on the yellow or red. And what we did at Elo, we wanted to really make an effort to understand what is the yellow area. So when you go to a doctor today, they are looking at this in a way that if you are under a certain marker or a certain threshold, then you're healthy. If you're over, you are sick. So it's very binary that your number goes over to the red, then you're going to be medicated or you're going to be chronically sick person. And if you're under, or just under, they don't really say anything to you. They're not going to tell you what to do. So at Elo, we extended that yellow band, and really be able to help you and highlight that, there's a warning light now. There's something you need to do or you can do before you get sick. And that's something is missing completely in the healthcare system today. But also, like I said, there's innovation happening in the sensor side, like the new patches or things that we can put in our body to collect data. There's also a lot of happening in the blood testing side, and in the next few years, you will be able to do 100 to 200 biomarkers, like 20 times more than today, at the price point of $100, and that will be a game changer because then today we test one or two things at a time, but in the future we can test everything every time from everybody, and we can actually find out these underlying issues that we don't know today. And your earlier point about HRV is super interesting because HRV was something that we didn't know what it means earlier, but now we are able to start to correlate HRV to other things. Think about if you have like a full panel of all your biomarkers, and you can connect that with the wearable devices like the sleep and recovery. I bet we can find out things that we had no idea. And I think we can find out correlations that we didn't know before. So that to me is super interesting field today.
Yeah, it is super interesting. And when I often get super excited about the technology and all the advancements that we're making, I also wonder, does it need to be so complicated? If you ever stop and think about it, it's like, well, 100 years ago, we weren't maybe living quite as long, or as debatable, let's say 200 years ago, we didn't have modern medicine. We didn't have the ability to have such extensive and intricate surgery and everything along those lines. But we were able to live pretty healthily and pretty well. We went and hunted for our food and we cooked it in a somewhat sanitary manner for that time. But we have that common sense and we have that availability of things now. So do you ever think that we maybe are beginning to over rely on technology rather than just listen to our instincts of what true health can really mean? And I know that we're battling against marketing about the chemical concoctions of food that are being created these days. But if we go to places like you are in super rural areas of Europe where they're drinking good wine, they're eating good fish, and they're just kind of enjoying time with their friends and their family, and they seem to be still getting it right. Do you ever find yourself conflicted between the technological advances, which seem amazing, but also the simplicity of health that we could actually live?
I mean, 100%, and having been involved in building the mobile devices, back in the days that basically have had the biggest impact on our lives out of anything I think we have ever invented. Think about it, you spend 5 hours with your phone every day, and it changed almost everything in a way we live our life. And just go back in time. Think about when you went into an event or city and you didn't find your friend because you didn't agree at the right time. I mean, that never happens. You never get lost. I mean, like people lost ability to navigate in a city and read a map in the last 5, 10 years. I mean, like we have lost a ton of different things that we did before. Like the street smart we had before as a society, as a human beings, is almost zero today because of the smartphones. Uh, I mean, we are too reliant on tech today. So at the same time, it's done a lot of great things. Like, we can communicate in a different way. We can do things we couldn't imagine before. Like, think about in San Francisco. I've been in a pilot and a beta group now for 6 months, where if I click a button on my app on phone, there will be a Cruise car. Cruise is the self-driving car company. The car comes to my home and picks me up to a new lawyer. There's no driver. It's a car driving to my home, picking me up and driving me to the city. I mean, that's insanely cool. I mean, I
It
mean,
is.
it will change everything this is live today. I do it. I mean, it's insane. We have a chat GTP and we have, AIs that are now talking to us like real people. You don't know the difference really. We are close of, this idea that, the Turing test is passed by computers. So like there's only thing we know for a fact is that the evolution is about change and the speed is getting increased, and we can never slow down this anymore. It just moves faster and faster. So the tech is here to stay, but your point is really good, is that is the tech built to drive us, or is it to build to help us? Um, some people say today that in 20 years from today, 90% of the work will be done by AI and the computers. Um, I would say that today already, 70% of people are being told by computer what to do. If you think about their work and your life, I mean, somehow the smartphone and the systems in your workplace, they are telling you what to do. We are already part of machine today. So we are living that already much deeper than most people even think about. But when it comes to health and knowing yourself, I think this idea that you want to know yourself, you want to live in the now. I'm a huge fan of Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now book, for example, that talks about the power of being in the moment, being present. Yeah, is super important, and we are really getting worse and worse at that every day. So I'm worried, but I think we can solve many of the problems today we are facing that are the climate change and kind of this sort of health crisis we are today. We can likely solve them with tech, but it might look a bit different than we expect today. And that's why I'm so uh, proud about kind of the team at Aura, what they did, because this ring, for example, it is ambient completely. It doesn't have a screen. It doesn't have a viper. It doesn't do anything to you. It's just a passive thing that you can then look at the data if you want. It doesn't come to your face every day. You can initiate it when you want. And that is, I think, the right way to do things more with tech. Make it more ambient. I mean, I'm happy to have sensors in my body to track me, but I don't need to know that data every day. But I would be excited to know when there's something wrong and it telling me to go to a doctor or do this or that. I would be happily, doing. But it's a really big question, and it's much bigger than just this one area. It's all our life, and also even like the question of who are we as species. I mean, like, why do we exist as humans? I mean, it's a very big existential question that comes with this tech.
Absolutely. And that's probably for part two or round two of this podcast in the future. But on that note as well, the final couple of questions I want to finish off with. I mean, I've got a big question in just a moment, but I want to come back to that point that you just made. And I think that that's probably part of the reason why you're in this industry, right? Like, if you want something done in what you see as an ethical and a proper way, that's where you get involved, right? And you try to steer the ship in that direction.
I mean, I'm one piece in a massive puzzle, and you try to do things that you think are valuable for you, and you want to live life in a way that you maybe ideally leave the place in a better condition than you inherited it. That's kind of my principle, is that you try to have a minimal footprint, and if possible you can maybe even leave something positive after you are done. But yeah, I mean, like if if you build if you're able to build something that can move the things in the right direction, and maybe if you can be a voice of reason a little bit when we think about there are a lot of people who say that the AI is the biggest risk we have for humanity. That the AI can take over, and the AI can kill all of us. I mean, maybe the Terminator was not wrong after all. So those are kind of the things that I talk a lot about with my peers, and we think about, like, how do we try to do things ethically right. In my case, I try to look at the healthcare from perspective, the Hippocrates oath, and never do harm. Start from the principle first, and never do any harm. Um, like, for example, in Elo, we test all our products with third-party labs. We never take the new products out that have no research. We don't do crazy stuff. We don't hyperdose stuff, and we try to be sensible and reasonable about it, and avoid doing any harm.
Amazing. And that ties into my last question today, is what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you're doing? But I think you've covered a fair amount in your answer just then.
Well, I think I started a company called Better Doctor after losing my first son, and the idea of the company, the tagline was to help million people find a better doctor. And as I said already, when people are in bad health, they are at their weakest, and at that time they need help. So, we built a company, and I think today we have been helping on some level over 200 million people to find a doctor. So I mean, I went 200 times over my initial goal with the first company. So I can be pretty happy about that, and I'm really proud about what the team did and what the company is still doing today. I'm not involved anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And where's the best place for people to find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing, Ari?
Yeah, I'm easy to find on the social mediums. Ari Tulla. I think I'm the only one with my name. So if you Google me, it's the first 50 pages likely my name. And then my company is you can find it at elo.health, not elo.com. Somebody is keeping the domain, much bigger company than we are. But elo.health, and you can find us on Instagram elo.health, and TikTok, and Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And also, elo.health website is a blog where we have a lot of content about nutrition. We write every day. There are more than 500 pieces already. We try to be this sort of a realistic, credible source for some questions you might have.
Ari, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
Hey, thank you.